Axel, you just ended by saying that Berlin is the perfect place for you to attack new markets. Why is that?
Well, I think there are many reasons. The fact that we chose Berlin was basically since I lived here. But the fact that we chose Germany was obviously since Germany is, the center of Europe, especially now becoming more and more important. And our other European sort of bases, London and Stockholm, are too remote. There's not the same sort of infrastructure that we need in a hub for launching, other markets in Europe.
All right. What are some of the new markets that you're going to?
Well, I can unfortunately not tell you which countries we have on the roadmap, but
is it south, west, east?
If you look at the largest music markets in the world, you have a couple of those left here in Europe. You obviously have countries like Poland, Turkey, Italy. We have smaller countries like Ireland where we haven't launched yet. So there's a great deal to be done.
Lots of work to do.
Yeah.
So Gunnar, you talked about Airbnb. What you didn't mention is that how you got to Airbnb. You started a company that did something similar to Airbnb, a marketplace for listings in Germany called Acoleo. It was acquired last year. I think it's exactly a year ago, right? So
that's right.
That's how you became country manager of Airbnb. So how long was it around? For 5 months only before you got acquired, or?
Depends on how you define the start date. So it actually started out as an idea, something we talk about over dinner, then more and more frequently start to work on a little bit, eventually get into an office, get a programmer to come on board. So it's really hard to say when it first started. I guess the first presentation about this was made a year before, but then gradually went into this.
But you were acquired rather rapidly.
That's right. So it was a really fascinating time. The last year, it was about approximately exactly 1 year ago that I first went to San Francisco, and at the time there were 30 people at Airbnb in what is a former garage in a very bad part of San Francisco. And we thought this couldn't be the right address really, but went inside and there were Macs on the tables and Post-its all over the wall. And these guys were really, had an amazing atmosphere. We were totally blown away by the team. And today we are 500 people across the world at Airbnb.
Right. How many in Europe?
I'm not sure exactly even on Europe. We've opened a bunch of new offices in Europe earlier this year. I think almost every bigger country.
Right. But Hamburg was the first office for Airbnb in Europe after the acquisition. Right. And they also acquired Crashpadder in the UK to grow. Do you think that's the way for them to grow in the future as well? Do small acquisitions locally?
It's not at all how we are growing. If you look at the larger scale, what these two acquisitions have added is mostly people and a few people that were needed at the time, but almost all the growth is coming from word of mouth and PR also in Germany.
Right. So I've been covering both your companies for a couple of years now. I've also used your services quite actively in the past. So I haven't raised funding from Earlybird yet, but maybe someday. Jason, can you tell us a little bit more about, because I don't know if you mentioned this in your opening presentation, but Earlybird was actually based in Hamburg as well, and you moved your office to Berlin because it was booming. So can you tell us a little bit more about why you moved here?
Sure. So obviously, typically we invest in between 25 and 30 companies per fund. If you split those up, about a third of them are going to be, very active in the local market. And obviously, when I say the local market, I mean German-speaking countries, which Germany alone is almost 25% of US GDP. If you take in Switzerland and Austria, you're getting almost 30% of US GDP. So actually, it is a gigantic market. So obviously, if you can create companies that are scaling very nicely for an investor like us, who report back to a very sophisticated group of limited partners who expect, in the early stage areas, sometimes, what do I know, X returns, then, you've got to find an interesting market. So some of our very best exits in our earlier funds were simply the number ones in Germany. So for example, we did a $1 billion IPO that returned 55 times the money on that investment, which today still is Germany's leading online mortgage broker. So the other third of the portfolio are obviously usually very active in Europe, and then the other third global. Now, everyone's ambition, as everyone knows, is to go global, but it's pretty hard to master the trick of doing that. If you look at Morgan Stanley's latest IPO book, where they give you the roadmap of the next 50 IPOs that are planned, you'll see that half of them are doing less than $50 million in revenue. But it's a very highly scaling business. So monthly recurring revenues, et cetera, are going through the roof. If you splice it by where most of their revenue is coming from, ironically, the US companies are there, 80+% of their revenues are US based. So even though everybody talks about the global game, I'd say really like 10% can really master the trick of what these two guys' companies are doing. In other words, creating global platforms. But again, in the investment game, that's sometimes not the end solution. So coming back to Berlin, we have from our last fund 10 investments in Berlin.
By the way, you also just raised $100 million for a target fund of $200 million.
That's right. That's right. So, and we'll shortly, hopefully, be closing the rest of that money. Usually, in the business, when you close your first round, it's much easier to do the second round because for people who don't know how the VC world works, they have to raise money as well, and it's very hard. Yes. And ironically, a lot of our investors are, unless they're a single-family office with more than $1 billion under management, multi-family offices, et cetera, are also raising money. Endowments are raising money from obviously their alma mater, et cetera. So you're right, Robin. Life is a big fundraising circle. But just back really briefly to Berlin. 10 companies here in the last fund out of 26. And so we started saying, okay, it looks like a lot of our deal flow in the last 3 or 4 years is starting to come from Berlin. We have an active set of investments in Berlin. The ecosystem here has matured. Vis-a-vis places like Munich and Hamburg, which we've seen comparatively fewer investable internationally marketable deals. So, it was a pretty easy equation to do this, and I'm surprised that there aren't more kind of funds on their way.
Yes, especially early stage, I agree. So one of your investments is Simfy, which brings me to my next question. Spotify launched in Germany relatively late, considering it's the third largest market in the world in terms of music sales. So you would think that it was one of the priorities, but it took 10 or 11 more countries before landing in Germany. So why did it take so long?
Well, I mean, as you say, Germany is the third largest music market in the world. It's an extremely important market for us. Also being a Swedish company, we had our eyes on Germany for a very long time. But it's not due to arrogance, but we don't really look that much at other streaming services or at so-called competition. When we launch in the market, we want to be 100% ready, and especially given the fact that Germany is not a very easy market, fairly defragmented, low Facebook penetration. We wanted to do the job right. We wanted to build a strong, talented local team here in Germany. We wanted to launch with strong partners, and we let that take the time it needed, and as mentioned before, the German launch has been our most successful launch to date. So I think our strategy paid off.
Can you share numbers?
I can unfortunately not share any numbers with you.
Mm-hmm. All right, not with me, but maybe with them.
Unfortunately, not.
All right, and if I promise not to tell anyone.
Well, we have, as you know, 10 million global active users globally, 3 million paying.
Right. That's the number that's been going around for a while, so it's probably higher. But, all right. But you do have a lot of competition. You can't go around it. You have Audio launched in Germany. You have Simfy. You have Deezer. What else? There's another one. Rhapsody is also, through the acquisition of Napster, kind of in Germany. So you don't look at the competition, you say, but that's...
I mean, I think the market, the streaming, digital music, as such, and streaming in particular the market is growing at a pace where we're not really taking market share from each other. I'm pretty sure that Simfy got a bump in users when we launched here.
So kind of like the rising tide lifts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the future, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then I'm sure that we're going to try to eat each other's lunch. And at the end of the day, there's probably only going to be one or a couple of streaming services out there, because obviously it doesn't make sense to subscribe to 2 streaming services, just like there couldn't be MySpace MySpace and a Facebook, there's going to be one or a few which make it, but that's a couple of years into the future.
Okay, similar question for Gunnar. Germany, for some reason, has the 3 big marketplaces for listings. You have Wimdu, you have 9flats, is also German, or at least Germany-born, and you have Airbnb in Germany. So why do you think these companies were made in Germany and not the UK, for example?
So I think the perception...
Does it have anything to do with the German culture of sharing, or...
Maybe less with the German culture of sharing. I think that's actually still taking some time until people get used to the idea of showing their private space on the web and then also allowing guests to come in. But I think it's maybe even more because of a mentality that I hear a lot about when we are in San Francisco. I think there's a cliche that German internet activity is often about looking what was done elsewhere and then trying to maybe execute that faster. And that's where those ideas could have come from. That is not something that I think is true maybe anymore or will be true in the future. I think there will be real innovation, and there were people here already today earlier that bring true innovation from Berlin.
Right.
And so that's only maybe the reason why this happened last year.
So we are at a conference in Berlin, which means we've been hearing a lot of good things about Berlin. What I want to hear is whether, because it's not all rainbows and unicorns, so what are some of the challenges of being based in out of Germany or Berlin specifically?
Airports not opening on time.
Airports delayed, yeah.
Taxi
I heard
strike.
that.
Yeah, I mean, we hit on the subject, cloning. I think it's a great topic because we're hit with it all the time, fundraising all over the world. But I think without that layer, Berlin would be less rich, and you wouldn't be able to poach guys from Rocket and everyone else and their mother, who tend to know what they're doing. In fact, a son from a German billionaire family came to us recently, very fresh out of university. He's like, look, I just got to work at a VC. And I said, look, actually very interesting background, but I know of an opening in Istanbul for a business development manager at Rocket Internet, and if you come back after a year after that, I guarantee you we'll make you a summer associate. And now he's in Istanbul, and I think that training is invaluable because you're going to get ups and downs and across the process fail in trying to replicate something. But I think what flows out of that, maybe that 20% is going to be non-linear, very original stuff. And then the trick in Berlin is to find the kind of talent that's going to be able to do it. Like these two guys, they know the game. They've already been in the game with their own companies, with their own exits. You're not going to always find that type of talent. But once you create a product that makes sense, I think Felix hinted at this earlier. That like intuitively it works. One of our companies, one of the founders came from Louisiana, and I remember we were looking for a syndicate partner, and the guy on the other side of the table, he told the founder, he goes, look, you've got to make a product so simple that even people in Louisiana can use. And of course, from that perspective,
that's a challenge.
Indeed, but in the bigger picture, I think that that type of talent is starting to either be self-produced here, or it's parachuting in, or you can poach them. You can fish from the pier in Berlin very easily into the Bay Area because there's a lot of froth and frenzy there. Now, there's another danger that you're going to get some of the recycled stuff that hasn't been able to really make it work over there. But look at some of the guys who went through the Valley of Death and Walk of Pain. I mean, guys like Mark Pincus, a lot of companies had written him off. They're like, shit, no hit, no hit, no hit. And where to with this guy? And there were a couple of guys in Boulder, Colorado that go, no, we know what he's capable of. So obviously through your networks, you build these up over time. You reach out for advice to different people, and you're going to start bringing in the right talent in Berlin if they're not already here.
So finding talent. Another challenge is for you specifically. Germany's not only a large market for music, it's also a very complicated market because of copyright holders, which are pretty tight grip on the market here. I've seen reports that when Spotify finally landed in Germany, it wasn't actually 100% legal yet because the agreements weren't signed yet, or at least not negotiated in full. Is that correct?
Well, when we launched in Germany on the 13th of March, we had an agreement with GEMA, the local collecting society, and just like in all other markets where we launch, we pay not only the record labels but also the collecting societies and all the rights holders, making sure that artists are compensated. When we're in the midst of negotiating a long-term deal with.
So you have an agreement; it's signed, but you're just negotiating another one, a longer term.
Yes, basically.
That's the situation. Okay. Are you paying the same standard fee that everyone else is paying, or?
Well, we can't really get into on what and how much we pay, but I think the important thing to know is that Spotify. I mean, our agreements are not with the artists. We have agreements with the labels, the four majors, and all of the indies and aggregators. So, part of our revenues are paid to them. And then we also have agreements with the collecting societies, and part of our revenues are paid to them. And then they, in turn, pay the artists. And since 2008, we've paid, I think, around 250 million euros to the industry, and that's roughly like 60 to 70% of our revenue that we pay out to the industry. And for us, obviously that's extremely important that musicians and artists are compensated the right way.
So what's the next thing for Airbnb in Europe? What's the next step?
I think we are still very much in the early days. It's like day 2 is beginning maybe tomorrow in Germany, but you'll see what that means. And I think right now we have a few thousand users who are active as hosts, and we...
Wait, did you say a few thousand in Europe that are hosting?
No, in Germany.
In Germany alone. Okay.
More than 10,000, but not a million yet. And so I guess it's still very much, those are still very much early adopters, and it's not widely known yet, and it's all very much almost a crazy thing to do when you tell people about this. And I think our next push is to go really into the mass market and get to where at least everybody has heard about it, but also more people and many people are using it occasionally. And I think it will be super widespread. We will think about why didn't we do this before. On the one hand, we'll think about all the money. I mean, I didn't mention this for our own apartment, but we've done that since September, and we've made more than 10,000 euros off of that. So nice. That pays for a few things to add for the apartment. It's quite significant. I would be feeling stupid leaving to San Francisco now and leaving my apartment empty, basically. I think more people will feel in this way, and it will be more and more the common way of using your space. But to get from a few early adopters to a wider market, that's what we are working on right now.
Nice. Okay. So what are some of the companies in your portfolio you're most excited about, Berlin-based?
So we just actually made 3 investments that unfortunately I can't talk about here. I know that this seems like Lord Dark, and we can't talk about. Obviously, mobile ad network, Madvertise, growing very nicely. They just acquired the largest mobile ad network in Turkey, etc. I mean, exactly. So I mean, I think there's a lot going on in our portfolio in Berlin. Now, you have to keep in mind, we're not just consumer internet. So, for example, what's new in this fund is we've carved out a new fund under Earlybird with our dedicated partner team for medical technology and online health. That's a booming sector. You could have one of these conferences here in Berlin just on that. And we have a couple of those types of investments here. We also have investments in I guess, the smart grid space. So some of you may have heard of Ubitricity. I mean, everybody knows that Germany in the year 2022 is flipping off the nuclear energy switch. So that's encouraged a lot of, let's call it faster commercialization out of places like Max Planck and Fraunhofer, which normally, you'd yawn and you'd kind of think of these guys in, sandals. But what's happening is they're starting to accelerate their stuff. And so their timing to market between their innovations is getting tighter. And so it starts getting more interesting there when you think about services that you could leverage over the smart grid, like Ubitricity. So it's exciting times, but I wouldn't want to lose sight of the market. I mean, I was just thinking, listening to these guys about how they're going to expand, just looking at Turkey and the Middle East, 450 million people, online penetration soaring, Facebook penetration soaring, payment systems are already rolled out. So it's such a fertile market, and it's our backyard, right? I mean, come on.
Same with Russia, by the way.
Yeah,
Russia and Turkey.
exactly. So it's very exciting times. You have a new class of investors who are ready to syndicate more, from Naspers to DST and everyone and their mother. And I know they look at somewhat larger tickets, but they're starting to creep down. And I hinted at this also, but we are seeing 2 new funds come into this market. They'll be parked in Germany. They're very experienced people. They'll be doing early stage, but they'll be fishing from the pier, doing all over Europe and Russia and the Middle East. So it's a new time. You have a new kind of class of investors, so it's not the dumb money that happened 12 years ago. So it's much more exciting.
Cool. So Airbnb, what's the next big market they're going to attack, you think, with a local office?
Well, I mean, I'm focused on Germany, and even if I think about Germany, it's almost entirely untapped. If you think about, we have now approximately 5,000 apartments in Berlin, but there are probably 1.8 million apartments there, and anybody can do it. So I think before I go anywhere else, I have a lot of work to do.
And word to word, mouth to mouth.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. What about Spotify?
Well, I mean, as said, we've launched in 13 markets now, and you know, even though we're very happy with where we are right now, there's obviously lots to be done. Not only in Europe, where there and the Middle East, where there are many interesting large markets. You also have.
But how important is it for Spotify to go to new markets? Or do you come to a certain point where you say, you know, we have to start monetizing these markets better. We're going to focus on that and then expand, or is it go as fast as you can?
Well, I mean, we're still a young company, still a startup, and our main ambition is growth, obviously. And you know, our entire business model builds on scale and on growth. And then, you know, international expansion, basically, you know, opening up the funnel, putting users into the funnel by launching a new country is one part of sort of the growth strategy. Another part is obviously sort of being able to activate those users in a better way. You know, the users that we pour into the funnel by launching in a new country, a sort of more product-based growth strategy. And I think we pursue both those parts of the strategy at the same time, basically.
Very cool. So on that note, we're out of time. I don't want to keep you all from lunch, so we're going to wrap up. Thank you very much, all of you, Axel, Gunnar, Jason. Round of applause for our panels.
Thanks, Robin. Hey, cool.